The three friends lived in a small town where life felt heavy and slow. Every morning they woke up to the sound of the old clock in the bakery where one of them worked. Another worked at a small diner washing dishes and serving coffee to people who rarely looked at her face. The third spent long hours at a laundromat, folding clothes and keeping machines running for the people who came and went without saying thank you. They were tired in ways that could not be washed away by sleep. Each of them had dreams bigger than the town could hold. They wanted to see more, feel more, and do more than just survive. One evening, they sat on the roof of the small apartment building where they lived. The sun was low, painting the sky in orange and pink shades that looked like a promise of something new. They talked about life and how it had a way of keeping them small. One of them said she had been reading about people who had changed their luck by taking chances. Another said she wished they could do something big, something that could lift them out of the routines that felt like chains. The third, quieter than the others, suggested they look for opportunities that seemed impossible to reach. They laughed softly, but the laughter carried a mix of hope and fear. A few days later, they saw a poster on a street lamp. It was for a horse auction in a town not far away. Cheap fillies were up for sale, and the ad said anyone could bid. The three friends stared at the poster. They had never thought about owning a horse. Horses were expensive, hard to take care of, and far from their ordinary lives. But something about the words cheap fillies stuck in their minds. They could buy one, maybe two, if they pooled their savings. They could learn to take care of it, train it, and perhaps even race it. The idea was reckless and thrilling. It was the first time in a long while that they felt a spark of excitement. They spent the next few nights planning. They counted every coin, every dollar saved from long hours of work. They talked about the risks and the challenges. The smallest one said she had read about people who bought horses and turned them into champions. The middle one thought about how hard it would be to care for the animals. The tallest, usually quiet, imagined the feel of a soft mane under her hand and the sound of hooves on the ground. By the end of the week, they had made up their minds. They would go to the auction and buy the fillies. They would take the chance that might change everything. The day of the auction was full of noise and dust. People from all over the county had come. The fillies stood in pens, looking nervous and small, their coats dull from lack of care. Some were beautiful and expensive, others looked weak and forgotten. The friends walked slowly along the rows, whispering to each other. They noticed the way the horses shifted their weight, the way their eyes watched the world. One filly in particular caught their attention. She was smaller than the others, her coat rough and her hooves uneven. But there was something in her gaze that felt alive, a spark that made the friends stop in their tracks. They decided to bid on 3 fillies, each choosing the one that spoke to her in a quiet way. The bidding was tense. The friends whispered numbers to each other and held their breath. Each time they won a bid, relief and excitement washed over them. Finally, they had the fillies. They were nervous, excited, and a little scared. They had spent almost all their savings, but they felt like they were holding a piece of possibility in their hands. Driving back home with the fillies in the trailer, they talked about what they would do. They had no experience with horses beyond seeing them in movies or books. They had no land of their own, only a small patch behind the apartment building. The smallest one suggested they build simple stables with what little wood they had. The middle one thought about feeding schedules and water buckets. The tallest imagined long runs where the horses could feel free. Their minds raced with plans and worries, but they were united by the feeling that they had done something important. The first night with the fillies was quiet. The girls sat outside the makeshift stables, listening to the animals shift and breathe. They were tired from the auction, the drive, and the effort of getting everything in place. One of the fillies nickered softly, and the girls felt a strange sense of connection. They had never cared for an animal so completely before. They promised themselves they would do everything they could to keep the horses healthy and happy. The night passed slowly, with the sounds of the small town and the occasional whinny of a filly. Days turned into weeks, and the friends learned quickly that taking care of horses was harder than they imagined. The fillies were stubborn, frightened, and sometimes sick. One of the girls stayed up late one night, holding a shivering filly and whispering to her until she calmed down. Another spent hours trying to teach a filly to walk calmly instead of bolting. The third learned to mix feed and water properly, realizing that even small mistakes could make the horses sick. They argued sometimes, frustrated with the animals and with each other. But every night they gathered together and shared what they had learned. Finding comfort in their shared struggle, the small town started to notice the girls and their horses. Neighbors watched from a distance, some curious, some doubtful. People whispered about how foolish it was to invest all their money in cheap fillies that might never race. But the girls ignored the whispers. They focused on the daily tasks, the feeding, grooming, and training. Slowly, they began to see changes. The fillies grew stronger, their coats shinier, and their steps more confident. The girls began to hope that maybe, just maybe, their gamble could work. One evening, the tallest friend suggested they take the fillies for a short run outside the town. The horses were nervous at first, pulling against the reins and stamping their hooves, but as the wind touched their faces, they began to move with grace and power. The girls ran alongside them, laughing softly at the joy of the moment. For a few hours, all worries of money, work, and survival faded. There was only the horses, the open field, and the feeling that something good was beginning. The first part of their journey was full of small victories and learning moments. They learned that patience was more powerful than frustration, that kindness could tame fear, and that together they could face challenges too big for one person alone. The friends did not yet know what the future held. They did not know if the fillies would ever race or bring them fortune, but they felt alive in a way they had not felt before. The fillies were no longer just cheap horses. They were companions, teachers, and the first step toward a life that promised something more. The friends went to bed each night, tired but hopeful, dreaming of the possibilities that the next day might bring. Taking care of the fillies became a full part of their lives. Each day was a struggle and a lesson. The smallest one often woke before sunrise to check on the horses. She would brush their coats and make sure the water was fresh. The middle friend fed them and measured their feed carefully, learning the names of every grain and vitamin. The tallest walked them in the fields, letting them stretch and get used to the feel of the earth under their hooves. It was not easy. Some days the fillies refused to eat or stumbled and hurt themselves. The girls would sit quietly beside them, calming them with gentle words and steady hands. They learned that horses felt fear and trust in ways that could not be rushed. Every small success brought a quiet joy that made all the hard work worth it. One morning, middle friend noticed that one filly had a limp. They rushed to the small vet in town, who shook his head at first. He said that without proper care, the horse might never be able to run properly. The girls listened carefully, feeling the weight of their mistake. They spent days tending to the injured filly, washing her legs, wrapping them, and feeding her special supplements. They slept little and worried constantly. Slowly, the filly began to walk more steadily, and her spirit lifted. The friends learned patience in a new way. The triumph of seeing her take a confident step was greater than any small joy they had known before. It showed them that their dedication could overcome challenges that seemed impossible. Training the fillies was another story. Horses were unpredictable. One day, they would run willingly and gracefully. The next day, they would bolt or refuse to move. The friends argued sometimes, frustration spilling over. The smallest one wanted to push harder. The middle one wanted to slow down and be cautious. The tallest tried to find a balance between the two. They learned to listen to each other, to negotiate, and to respect the horse's moods and limits. They also learned to celebrate small victories. When a filly finally trotted in a straight line without fear, they clapped softly and whispered congratulations to each other. They understood that training was not about speed or money. It was about connection, trust, and understanding. Word of the girls and their horses began to spread. Neighbors watched curiously. Some even stopped to ask questions. A few scoffed, thinking that the girls were wasting their money and time. One neighbor called it a foolish dream, but the girls ignored the ridicule. They were focused on the fillies, each day learning more about their personalities, habits, and quirks. The horses began to recognize them, nudging them with soft noses and following them without reins when they were in open fields. That small trust was precious to the friends. They started to see that the bond between human and horse could not be bought. It had to be earned with patience, respect, and kindness. One afternoon, while walking the fillies along the edge of a nearby meadow, they met a trainer who had a small stable nearby. He noticed how carefully the girls were handling the horses and asked if he could give them advice. They listened eagerly. He showed them how to help the horses move correctly, how to adjust their stance and balance, and how to encourage them without fear. The girls asked endless questions and tried to absorb everything he said. The trainer saw their dedication and promised to visit sometimes to check on progress. For the friends, this was a moment of hope. They felt that they were not alone in their struggle. The guidance could help them reach goals that seemed far away. Evenings were filled with reflection. After feeding and cleaning the stables, the girls would sit together under the open sky. They talked about how much they had learned, how hard it had been, and how satisfying it was to see the fillies respond to care and training. They laughed at the mistakes they had made and shared small victories. One night, they watched a filly run freely across the field, her mane shining in the moonlight. They held hands and felt a quiet pride. They realized that they were changing too, becoming stronger, more patient, and more confident in themselves. The fillies began to show signs of real talent. One was fast but stubborn, refusing to obey commands at first. Another was careful and steady, always listening to the girls' cues. The third had a spark that sometimes shone unexpectedly, running with speed that made the friends gasp. They started planning small races, imagining what it might feel like to see their horses compete. They knew the path ahead was long and uncertain, but the progress so far made them dream bigger. The idea that a filly could win a race was no longer impossible, though it was still frightening to imagine. One day, the smallest friend noticed that the fastest filly had scraped her leg on a fence. Panic filled them for a moment, but then they remembered the lessons of patience and care. They cleaned the wound, wrapped it carefully, and sat with the filly until she calmed. The middle friend made a mix of healing herbs and fed it gently. The tallest stayed near, speaking softly and stroking her mane. By the next day, the filly was walking with confidence again. That day, the friends understood the value of teamwork, not just among themselves, but with the horses. They were learning to face problems together, to overcome fear with calm action. The small town began to change its view of the three friends. People saw the dedication, the patience, and the care the girls put into their work. Some neighbors started to offer advice or small help. One local store owner brought extra feed when he heard the girls were struggling. Another offered to lend tools for building a better stable. Slowly, the whispers of doubt turned into curiosity and quiet respect. The friends felt that the small town was becoming a place where dreams could grow if people cared enough to try. The girls continued to train and care for the fillies, with daily routines that felt like a blend of work, study, and love. They began to notice patterns in the horses' behavior, learning to anticipate their moods and needs. They discovered that some fillies responded to gentle music, while others liked quiet and stillness. They adjusted their methods, trying to create the best environment for growth and learning. It was a slow process, filled with trial and error, but the girls were patient and determined. They knew that every small step mattered, that small efforts could lead to large results if repeated consistently. Even the challenges that seemed impossible at first became lessons in courage. When a filly refused to move across the field, they did not force her. Instead, they tried new approaches, guiding her slowly, showing her that running could be safe and fun. When another filly showed fear around other horses, they spent long hours introducing her gently to the herd, letting her observe without pressure. Over time, the horses learned trust, and the girls learned the depth of connection that comes from understanding another being completely. Every small success was a celebration, quiet proof that dedication and care could change lives. As the weeks passed, the friends felt a new sense of purpose. Their days were no longer just about surviving, but about creating something meaningful. The fillies were teaching them more than they expected, showing them how to work hard, stay patient, and trust in their own abilities. They also discovered joy in the little things of Filly, nuzzling them in the morning, sound of hooves on soft earth, the shine of a healthy coat under sunlight. The connection between human and horse was growing stronger, and with it, the hope that their dreams could come true. They did not yet know what the future held, but they knew that together they could face anything. They were no longer just three friends with small dreams. They were a team, a family, and the beginning of something extraordinary was quietly unfolding around them. The friends noticed that the Fillies were growing stronger and more confident each day. What once seemed impossible slowly became routine. Every morning, they woke early to feed, clean, and exercise the horses. The smallest would brush the coats and check for injuries. The middle one measured feed and mixed supplements, while the tallest led the horses across the fields, letting them stretch and run freely. They were learning more than they expected. They discovered the personality of each filly, the way one liked, quiet and stillness. The other responded to gentle encouragement, and the third showed a spark of energy that could not be tamed by words alone. Each girl formed a bond with a particular filly, but they all shared responsibility for every horse. The bond between them and the animals was growing deeper. Built on trust, patience, and care, one day they decided to try a small race among themselves to see how the horses would behave under excitement. They set up a short track behind the stables. At first, the fillies hesitated, unsure of what was expected. The girls used gentle encouragement, walking alongside and guiding them slowly. By the third attempt, the horses ran with energy, their hooves kicking up dust, ears forward, eyes bright. The friends cheered softly, their hearts racing with joy. It was not a real race, but it gave them hope that their hard work could bring results. They spent hours analyzing what worked, noting which horse responded best to different methods, and how to help the hesitant ones find confidence. The trainer who had noticed them before came by to watch. He smiled and gave advice on posture, commands, and timing. The girls listened carefully, practicing everything he suggested. They realized that training was not just about speed, but about understanding the horses, serving their moods, and adapting to their needs. The fillies were teaching them as much as they were teaching the horses. Every success was small but meaningful. The trainer praised their patience, telling them that many people gave up before seeing progress. This encouragement strengthened their resolve. They felt that the impossible was slowly becoming possible. Days turned into weeks, and the friends continued to care for the fillies with routines that became second nature. They fed, cleaned, and trained with consistency. They noticed subtle changes in the horses. One filly started to respond to subtle signals, moving without hesitation. Another gained balance and strength, running with steady confidence. The third showed bursts of speed that surprised even the girls. They took careful notes, shared ideas, and experimented with gentle methods. The horses were responding, and the girls could see progress that others in town had not expected. Pride, mixed with determination. And the friends felt that something meaningful was happening. One afternoon, a storm rolled in. The sky darkened and wind rattled the stables. The fillies were scared, shifting in their pens and calling softly to each other. The friends rushed to secure the stables, checking every latch and making sure the horses were safe. They stayed close, stroking manes and whispering soothing words. Hours passed, and the storm gradually subsided. When it was over, the fillies were calm, and the friends felt a sense of relief and accomplishment. They had faced fear together and protected the animals they cared for. The experience strengthened their bond and showed them the importance of resilience, courage, and calm in the face of challenges. The local townspeople began to notice the improvements in the fillies. Some came by to watch the horses run and train. A few offered advice or small donations of feed and equipment. The friends felt a quiet pride in how far they had come. People were no longer laughing or whispering about foolish dreams. Instead, curiosity and respect were growing. The girls smiled at this small recognition, but remained focused on the work ahead. They knew that patience and consistency were more important than praise. The fillies were still young and learning, and the road ahead was long. Encouraged by the progress, the friends decided to enter a local race. It was a small event, more about community than competition, but it was a first step. They spent days preparing, walking the track with the Fillies, practicing starts and turns, and ensuring that the horses were confident. Excitement and nerves filled the air. The morning of the race, the friends led the Fillies to the starting line. People from the town gathered to watch, curious about the young women and their horses. The friends whispered words of encouragement to each other and to the horses. When the race began, the Fillies ran with energy and grace. They did not win first place, but they finished with a strong showing, steady and fast. The friends cheered quietly, proud of the effort and progress. It was a small victory, but a meaningful one. After the race, the trainer praised their work. He said the Fillies had potential, and with careful training they could achieve great results. The friends felt a renewed sense of purpose. They realized that small victories were building confidence in the horses and in themselves. They learned that patience, consistency, and understanding were keys to success. The experience taught them that progress might be slow, but it was worth every effort. They spent the evening reflecting on what they had learned, sharing ideas, and planning the next steps. Their bond as friends and trainers had strengthened, and the journey was beginning to feel like something larger than themselves. Life continued with routines of care, training, and observation. The friends noticed that the Fillies were developing distinct personalities. One was cautious and careful, always observing before acting. Another was eager and energetic, responding quickly to commands. The third was unpredictable but showed moments of brilliance that hinted at great potential. The friends learned to adapt their approach to each horse using patience and encouragement rather than force. They celebrated small successes, noting improvements, and sharing quiet moments of pride. Every day brought new challenges, but also new lessons and joys. One afternoon, the smallest friend found that one filly had a sore hoof. They carefully cleaned it and checked for injuries. The middle friend prepared a poultice while the tallest stayed with the filly, soothing her with gentle words. Hours passed, but eventually the hoof felt better. The friends learned that care and attention to detail could prevent serious problems. They also realized that teamwork was essential. Each of them had strengths that complemented the others. Together, they could face any obstacle and help the horses thrive. This understanding deepened their bond and strengthened their confidence. Evenings were quiet and reflective. After a long day of work, the friends would sit together under the open sky, talking about the horses, their progress, and their dreams. They discussed what they had learned about trust, patience, and resilience. They shared stories from their own lives, connecting personal struggles with the lessons the Fillies were teaching them. The bond between the friends was growing stronger, built on shared effort, care, and understanding. They realized that the journey with the Fillies was changing them in ways they had not expected. They were becoming more patient, more confident, more capable of facing challenges. As the weeks passed, the Fillies showed steady improvement. They were stronger, faster, and more responsive. The friends began to see glimpses of potential greatness. One filly could sprint with unexpected speed. Another could maintain a steady pace without tiring. And the third showed sudden bursts of energy that could surprise even experienced trainers. The girls documented every observation, carefully noting strengths and weaknesses. They began to imagine future races, larger challenges, and the possibility of recognition beyond their small town. Their dreams were no longer distant fantasies. They were building a foundation that could make those dreams real. The friends also noticed changes in themselves. They were more disciplined, more patient, and more resilient. They had learned to face challenges without fear, to work together through disagreements, and to find joy in small victories. The experience with the Fillies was teaching them life lessons that went beyond horses and races. They were learning about trust, teamwork, perseverance, and hope. The connection with the animals was deepening. It was creating a bond that inspired them to give their best every day. One morning, the trainer returned to check on their progress. He was impressed with the growth of the Fillies and praised the friends for their dedication. He offered advice on refining training techniques, adjusting diet, and preparing for more competitive races. The friends listened carefully, eager to learn and implement every suggestion. They realized that guidance and mentorship were invaluable. With support and careful planning, they could achieve results that seemed beyond reach. The visit strengthened their confidence and renewed their determination to continue their journey. The community also began to change. People started to watch the girls train, offering encouragement and support. The neighbors who once doubted them now smiled and asked questions. Some even offered small help, lending equipment or sharing tips. The girls felt a sense of belonging and recognition. Their efforts were beginning to be seen, and the respect they earned was a quiet reward for their hard work. It reinforced the idea that dedication and perseverance could inspire others and create positive change by the end of this part of their journey. The Friends had grown in ways they had not anticipated. They had faced setbacks, learned patience, built trust, and experienced small victories. The Fillies had developed confidence, strength, and glimpses of potential greatness. The girls were no longer just three friends with a dream. They were trainers, caregivers, and partners in a journey that promised more than survival. They were building a life filled with purpose, connection, and hope, laying the foundation for the unexpected, miracles that might one day come. The Friends woke early that morning, feeling a mix of excitement and nervousness. The Fillies were restless in their pens, sensing the energy of the day. They were entering a regional race, bigger than any they had experienced. The small-town race had been a practice, but now the stakes were higher. The Friends had trained for weeks, carefully observing every step and adjusting techniques to help the horses perform their best. The smallest one brushed the horses' coats, feeling the shine and strength beneath her fingers. The middle friend prepared feed and water, making sure the horses were nourished but not too full before the race. The tallest walked them gently in circles, letting them stretch and feel the open air before heading to the track. The road to the race was full of challenges. One filly, usually steady, became nervous at the sight of other horses. The Friends worked together, whispering words of encouragement and using calm movements to guide her. The other two fillies sensed the tension and responded with energy that was unpredictable. The Friends had to adjust constantly, moving between the horses, keeping them calm and focused. By the time they arrived at the track, the fillies were sweating and nervous, but ready. The trainer who had supported them arrived to offer final advice, showing them ways to help the horses maintain focus and energy. The Friends listened carefully, trying to absorb every tip while keeping their own nerves in check. The race began with a burst of energy. The fillies surged forward, muscles moving with precision and strength. The Friends watched closely, their hearts pounding with every stride. The usually cautious filly hesitated at the first turn, but a gentle nudge and calm words from her friend helped her regain rhythm. The energetic filly led the pack, ears forward and eyes bright, but she needed guidance to stay on track. The third filly, the one with bursts of unexpected speed, ran steadily at first, then suddenly found an extra gear that surprised even the trainer. The Friends ran alongside when allowed, shouting encouragement and guiding the horses with subtle movements. The crowd cheered, but the Friends focused on their bond with the fillies, knowing that panic or distraction could undo all their careful training. Midway through the race, it became clear that the unexpected miracle was happening. The third filly, once overlooked and underestimated, started to take the lead. Her strides were long and smooth, her energy perfectly timed. The Friends could hardly believe what they were seeing. She had been the smallest and weakest at first, often fearful and stubborn. Yet now, she was running with power and grace that seemed beyond explanation. The other fillies responded to her energy, staying close and keeping pace, but the miracle filly seemed unstoppable. The Friends felt a mix of awe and disbelief, realizing that all their patience, care, and effort had led to this moment. They shouted encouragement, their voices mingling with the rhythm of hooves pounding the track as the race reached the final stretch. The miracle filly pulled further ahead. The other competitors from nearby towns tried to catch up, but she maintained her lead with a steady rhythm that seemed effortless. The Friends felt tears sting their eyes, a mix of pride, relief, and disbelief. The months of struggle, the nights of worry, the moments of doubt had all led to this extraordinary moment. The filly crossed the finish line first, a clear and undeniable victory. The friends hugged each other, laughing and crying at the same time. They had done it. The miracle they had hoped for, but never dared to imagine, had come true. The crowd erupted in applause, cheering not just the filly, but the determination and spirit of the friends who had nurtured her. The trainer came running, smiling broadly and praising their dedication and understanding. Other trainers and competitors approached, asking questions and offering congratulations. The friends were overwhelmed, feeling the reality of their achievement sinking in. The fillies, tired but proud, nuzzled them as if to say thank you for believing in them. The friends realized that the bond they had built with the animals was the true source of this miracle. Their hard work and trust had transformed a small, fearful filly into a champion. After the race, the friends spent hours talking to reporters and locals who wanted to hear their story. They spoke about patience, care, and understanding, emphasizing that success was not about shortcuts or force, but about dedication and love. They described the months of training, the nights of worry over injuries, and the moments of joy at small victories. People listened, inspired by their honesty and commitment. The friends felt proud, not for the attention, but for the knowledge that they had stayed true to their values and their vision. The victory brought immediate opportunities. Sponsorship offers, invitations to larger races, and support from the community began to arrive. The friends were cautious, discussing each option and making careful decisions. They knew that sudden success could be overwhelming if not handled thoughtfully. They continued their routines, feeding and caring for the fillies with the same dedication as before, ensuring that their priorities remained clear. The friends also reflected on the miracle filly, understanding that talent alone was not enough. The combination of care, training, patience, and belief had made the difference. They knew that every horse had potential if treated with respect and love. In the following weeks, the friends trained the fillies for upcoming races. They used the experience of the regional race to adjust techniques, refine routines, and build confidence. The miracle filly continued to show remarkable ability. But the friends also paid attention to the other fillies, ensuring that they grew strong and confident. They balanced training with care, recognizing that each horse had unique needs and strengths. The bond between human and animal deepened further, creating a sense of unity that extended beyond the racetrack. The friends learned to read the horses' moods, anticipate reactions, and guide them gently but firmly toward improvement. Life in the small town began to change around them. People admired the friends and their dedication, offering support and encouragement. Some young people expressed interest in learning about horses and training. The friends welcomed this attention, sharing their knowledge and experience. They began to see that their journey was about more than personal success. It was about inspiring others, showing that determination, care, and patience could turn dreams into reality. They realized that their story was becoming larger than themselves, reaching into the lives of those around them and creating hope where there had been doubt. Evenings were filled with quiet reflection. After the horses were fed and settled, the friends would sit together in the stable, discussing the day's progress and planning for the next steps. They shared thoughts, ideas, and dreams, supporting each other through moments of uncertainty. The miracle filly often nuzzled them as they spoke, a reminder of the trust and bond that had made their victory possible. The friends felt a sense of peace and fulfillment that went beyond winning races. They had built something meaningful, a life filled with purpose, connection, and love. As the friends prepared for future races, they also thought about how to sustain their success. They built stronger stables, improved feeding routines, and continued to learn from experienced trainers. They documented every observation about the fillies, noting strengths, weaknesses, and progress. They celebrated small victories and learned from setbacks, knowing that consistent effort and attention to detail were key to long-term achievement. The miracle filly remained their inspiration, a symbol of what patience, care, and belief could create. The friends also took time to enjoy the simple joys of their journey. They walked the fillies through fields, watched the sun rise and set, and laughed at small mischiefs the horses would create. They shared meals and quiet moments together, reflecting on how far they had come. They realized that the journey itself was as important as the victories. Every challenge, every late night, every moment of doubt had taught them something valuable. They felt gratitude for the opportunity to care for the horses and for the bond that had formed between them. The miracle of the race was only part of a larger story of growth, trust, and transformation. By the end of this chapter in their lives, the friends had experienced something extraordinary. The miracle filly had shown them the power of patience and belief. The other fillies had grown stronger and more confident. The community had recognized their dedication and spirit. The friends had learned lessons that went beyond horse training, understanding the value of trust, teamwork, and perseverance. They felt ready for whatever challenges lay ahead, knowing that together they could face anything. The unexpected miracle had not only changed their lives but also opened the door to a future filled with hope, opportunity, and the possibility of more extraordinary moments. The friends woke to a quiet morning, the sun casting soft light over the stables. The fillies were calm, eating quietly, and the air smelled of hay and earth. After the races, their lives had changed, but they remained the same in spirit. They were still three friends, caring for horses with dedication and love. They walked through the stables, brushing coats and checking hooves, feeling the bond between themselves and the animals that had become a central part of their lives. Each filly moved with confidence, strength, and grace, a living reminder of how far they had come. The smallest one smiled as she noticed the shine in the miracle filly's coat, her muscles rippling with health. The middle friend checked the feed, ensuring every horse had exactly what it needed, and the tallest friend walked them gently through the fields, letting them stretch before another day of training began. Life had not become easy. There were still early mornings, long days, and occasional setbacks. One filly injured herself while running across the field. Another refused to follow commands during training. But the friends faced these challenges with patience and teamwork, remembering the lessons of the past months. They knew that setbacks were part of the journey, and that every small victory was earned through care and persistence. They worked together to solve problems, leaning on each other's strengths and offering support when one felt tired or discouraged. Through it all, their bond had grown stronger, rooted in shared responsibility and trust. The community had changed too. People now came to watch the fillies train, asking questions, offering advice, sharing stories of their own experiences with animals. The friends welcomed the attention, using it as an opportunity to teach others about patience, care, and dedication. They showed how the fillies had grown, emphasizing that every success had come from consistent effort and understanding rather than luck or shortcuts. Local children began to visit, learning to brush, feed, and handle the horses under the friends' guidance. The friends realized that their journey was not only about their own dreams, but also about inspiring and helping others to find confidence and hope. They felt pride not only in the fillies, but in the way their story had touched the town. The friends continued to enter races, both local and regional. Each race brought new challenges, but also new opportunities for growth and recognition. The miracle filly continued to shine, often leading the pack and winning races against more experienced competitors. The other fillies showed steady improvement, their confidence growing with each day of careful training. The friends celebrated victories together, but they also took time to reflect on the lessons learned from losses and setbacks. They knew that the journey was ongoing, and that dedication, patience, and understanding were the keys to long-term success. The races were no longer just competitions. They were a measure of progress, a way to see the results of their hard work and care with their growing success. The friends decided to invest in better facilities. They expanded the stables, creating more space for the horses to move freely and comfortably. They improved feeding routines, added areas for training and exercise, and built spaces for the community to learn about horse care. They wanted to create an environment where horses could thrive and where people could come to understand the value of patience, care, and teamwork. The friends worked tirelessly, planning every detail, ensuring that the stables were safe, comfortable, and welcoming. The fillies responded to the improvements, moving with energy and confidence. Enjoying the space that had been carefully prepared for them, the friends also began to mentor others. Young people from the town visited regularly, learning how to care for horses, train them gently, and understand their needs. The friends shared their story, emphasizing that miracles were not about sudden luck, but about consistent effort, belief, and care. They taught that every small action mattered, from feeding and grooming to observing behavior and adjusting techniques. The students watched in awe as the fillies ran freely, learning from the careful guidance of the friends. The friends found joy in teaching, seeing the spark of curiosity and determination in the eyes of those who came to learn. Their own journey had become a source of inspiration, creating a ripple effect in the community. Days were filled with training, care, and teaching. Evenings were quiet, spent reflecting on progress and planning for the future. The friends took time to enjoy simple moments, walking the fillies through the fields, watching the sun rise and set, and sharing stories about their journey. They laughed at the small mischiefs of the horses, celebrated small victories, and comforted each other through challenges. The miracle filly often stayed close, nuzzling them as if to share in the joy of these quiet moments. The friends understood that the journey was as important as the victories, and that the bond they had built with the horses and each other was the true reward. The friends also explored opportunities beyond their town. Invitations to larger competitions arrived, and they considered each one carefully. They wanted to ensure that the horses were prepared and that the experience would be positive. They traveled to new locations, meeting other trainers, learning new techniques, and observing different racing environments. Each journey brought challenges, but also new knowledge and confidence. The friends realized that their dreams were expanding, that their small-town beginnings had prepared them for something larger. They remained grounded, focused on care, training, and patience, knowing that success came from consistent effort and understanding as the years passed. The friends built a thriving training and racing operation. The fillies grew into strong, confident horses, respected by competitors and admired by the community. The friends' reputation spread beyond the town, attracting attention from people who wanted to learn from their methods. They continued to mentor young trainers, sharing their philosophy of patience, care, and consistent effort. The journey had transformed them, shaping their character and expanding their understanding of what could be achieved through dedication and belief. They knew that the miracles they had experienced were not just about winning races, but about growth, connection, and perseverance. The friends also took time to reflect on their journey. They remembered the early days, when life had felt heavy and hopeless. They recalled the long nights of worry, the mistakes, the injuries, and the moments of doubt. They smiled at how far they had come, realizing that each struggle had taught them something valuable. They understood that miracles were born from effort, trust, and unwavering belief. They had nurtured not just the fillies but themselves, learning resilience, patience, and the power of teamwork. The friends felt gratitude for the journey, for each other, and for the animals that had changed their lives in ways they could never have imagined, even as they experienced success. The friends remained humble. They continued to care for the fillies with the same dedication as in the beginning. Understanding that attention to detail and love were essential to maintaining health, confidence, and performance, they balanced training, racing, mentoring, and daily care, ensuring that their values remained at the center of everything they did. The friends knew that success without care was empty, and they remained committed to the philosophy that had guided them from the start. Their bond with the fillies and with each other continued to grow, creating a foundation for future adventures and achievements. In the quiet moments of the day, the friends often sat together in the fields, watching the fillies run freely. They reflected on the journey from the first day they bought the cheap fillies to the moment of regional victory and beyond. They remembered the challenges, the small victories, and the unexpected miracle that had changed everything. They felt a deep sense of fulfillment knowing that their hard work, patience, and belief had created something extraordinary. The fillies were no longer just horses. They were symbols of dedication, trust, and the power of dreams nurtured with love. The friends felt a sense of peace and happiness. That came from knowing they had stayed true to themselves, and to the journey they had begun together. The story of the three friends and the fillies became a legend in the town. People spoke of their dedication, their patience, and the miracles that could be achieved through consistent effort and belief. Young trainers looked to them for guidance, inspired by the journey from small beginnings to extraordinary success. The friends continued to train, race, and mentor, finding joy in each day, each step of progress, and each bond formed with the horses and the people they taught. They understood that life was a series of challenges and victories, and that true fulfillment came from the journey itself, from the care and love invested in every small action. As the sun set over the stables, the friends stood together, watching the fillies run across the fields. They felt a sense of completion and new beginnings at the same time. The journey that had started with 3 cheap fillies had transformed their lives, teaching them about resilience, dedication, and the power of belief. They knew that the future held more challenges, more races, and more lessons, but they were ready. Together, they had created something meaningful, a life filled with purpose, connection, and hope. The unexpected miracle of the Miracle Filly had opened the door to a world of possibilities, showing that dreams nurtured with patience and love could truly come true. The friends walked back to the stables, hearts full, ready to continue their journey with the same care, dedication, and belief that had brought them this far.